Good afternoon, everyone. It is Wednesday, January the 13th, 2021. It is currently 3:10 p.m. Central Time. I'm here at Victory Baptist Church, and we are going to once again turn our attention, to these things that I'm using right now, words. We're going to turn our attention to your words, your speech, my speech, just what the Bible has to say in regards to speech, and we're doing this for an obvious reason. Right now, there is so much arguing and fighting about words, right? What words were said? Did those words lead to what happened at the Capitol building in Washington? Who said them? Who should, and what should be the consequences to what they said? Words. And who can say what on Twitter? Who can say what on Facebook? And should they be banned? And freedom of speech. And everyone's talking about speech and words. But as usual, many times Christians, we look over to the world and the narrative that they are creating, and we jump in the middle of that narrative, trying to argue, in a sense, we try to make an argument in regards to the narrative the world created, but we shouldn't do that. We have our own narrative. It's found in the pages of the Bible. So I think the first thing we have to discuss when we start talking about speech, and we want to, I know immediately you want to start arguing about free speech. The first thing we need to do is, what does the Bible have to say in regards to speech? What does the Bible have to say in regards to our words? And we have spent 2 episodes talking about our words. I would challenge you to go back and listen to part 1 and part 2. And today we are going to advance that previous discussion by once again turning our attention to our words. I think here we're going to focus more on the wrong kind of words. I think that's what we're going to focus on here, the wrong kind of words. We in a sense, if you think of part 1, we kind of talked about the importance of words, that every idle word, God cares about every idle word, and that our words justify or condemn. And then we looked at the second one, we looked at Psalm 19, which was kind of interesting. And we kind of looked at how God's revelation should impact our words and how the word of God should impact our words. And we also spent a lot of time talking about, and I think this is very important, especially leading into this discussion. I really wanted to get this idea that and I stressed this, I think, in part 1 and repeated it in part 2, that remember our lip trouble, our speech problems, our speech trouble is a heart problem. It's heart trouble. And I really want you not to forget that. And a very important thing, another very important concept that I do not want you to forget, and I want you to hear me, is that there's really so many. I feel like I'm getting ready to re-preach everything. Let me try to go through this. A couple of things I want you to remember. I do not want you to forget these. All right. So first of all, our mouth, our speech problem. If we have a problem with what we say, if we have lip trouble, if we have a mouth problem and how we speak, just remember it is really a heart problem. And what we have a tendency to do, so that's the first thing. Our speech is really a heart issue. It's not a speech issue. So let's not forget that. And secondly, I think this is very important. Sometimes we have a tendency to simply try to regulate our speech. We don't go to the root of the problem, which is our heart. We just clean up our speech. We just clean it up. And we're like, okay, don't use that bad word. Don't use that bad word. Oh, I can't say that. Don't say that. Dun, da, da, we fixed it. No, it's still a heart problem. It's still something going on inside of you. That's what you have to fix. And number 3, this is very important. We have a tendency to Christianize our speech. We clean it up. We make it sound good. We make it look good. But if we're really paying attention, it still reflects the corruption in us. We just say the right words. We just say the wrong thing using the right words, and everyone seems to go along with it. And we can't just Christianize our speech. Well, I don't say bad words. Yeah, but you still reflected, arrogance and gossip and slander, and you still reflected, but now you may cover up that gossip and slander by saying you're giving a prayer request, but the same thing is still being shown. You just do it in a different way. And I think all of those concepts are very, very important. There's more I could repeat, but I don't want to turn this into a review. So are you ready? For this episode, for this time together, this Wednesday afternoon, while the world right now is arguing about speech, let's look to the Bible and what we can learn about speech today. And I think today we're going to end up in the book of Proverbs. That sound good? The book of Proverbs. Yes, I heard you. I heard you say, yes, that sounds wonderful. I hope so. If you can, open a Bible to the book of Proverbs. And we are going to look at Proverbs chapter 18. Proverbs chapter 18, which I have open right here in front of me. Proverbs chapter 18, and I think we're going to look at verses 6 through 8. Proverbs chapter 18, verses 6 through 8 is going to be the foundational passage we're going to look at for this episode. Once again, turning our attention to words. Where the world is arguing about words and speech, we're going to try to get a biblical perspective on the subject, all right? Proverbs chapter 18, I should say. Proverbs chapter 18. If I said 8, I apologize. Proverbs chapter 18, verses 6 through 8. Here we go. A fool's lips enter into contention, and his mouth calleth for strokes. Let's just stop right there. A fool's lips enter into contention, and his mouth calleth for strokes. That's Proverbs 18:6. A fool's lips enter into contention, and his mouth calleth for strokes. Now, the first thing I would just point out, first thing that just jumps out at me here is, please note, it's a fool's lips. The lips reflect what the person is, what is going on in the person. The person is a fool, foolish. There's something deeper going on, and now the lips are going to reflect that foolishness in a specific way here. So please note, you have the reality, the internal reality that now comes through the lips. It is shown. You have the reality of the heart. So this is a fool's lips. Enter into contention. A fool's lips enter into contention. Now, let's do a little bit of work. Let's pull up Proverbs chapter 18, verse 6, and we'll use the Blue Letter Bible app. Feel free to download the Blue Letter Bible app on your mobile device, all right? Because whenever I do this, then you can go along right with me. Proverbs chapter 18, pull up verse 6. Let's click on it. The interlinear pops up. All right, a fool's lips enter into contention. Contention. Let's see what the word is, the Hebrew word is for contention here. It is this.
Strong's H, 7379, Reeve, and second entry, Riv, and third entry, Riv.
All right, 3 entries. I can't roll my tongue like that. So Rev, okay, you get the idea. Reeve, okay, the different ways of saying it, all right? And it's used 62 times. So Reeve, it is used 62 times. I'll play them one more time for you. He'll give you all 3 entries. Here we go. One more time.
Strong's H, 7379, Reeve, and second entry, Riv, and third entry, Riv.
Reeve, Rev. Again, I can't roll my tongue that way. I apologize. I cannot. So that's just the way it is. Okay. That is my weakness. Okay. I have lots of weaknesses, but that is one. But the idea, whether you can say it correctly or not, just understand the Hebrew word is used 62 times. That's important. And it's translated the following ways: cause, 24 times; strife, 16 times; controversy, 13 times; contention, 2 times. Strong's definitions, basically, they give it this way: a contest, personal or legal; adversary, cause, chiding; contend, controversy; multitude, pleading; strife, striving; suit. Those are the different ways. That's the different ways. That's the different definitions found in Strong's. Now, it's used 62 times. We could go through all 62 times, which would then detour this discussion about the wrong kind of words into a word study on the word here. This is a Bible study exercise. You know how this works. I do some of the work and I give you the rest of the work. So you may want to grab a Blue Letter Bible app and look up Proverbs 16:8 here, or Proverbs 18:6 here, Proverbs 18:6. And look up the word contention, and then just read through or skim all 62 occurrences of the word so that you can really understand it. The outline of biblical usage goes something like this. This idea is strife, controversy, dispute, strife, quarrel, dispute, controversy, case at law. So it is the fool, according to Proverbs here, it's the fool's lips that enter into contention, into strife, and dispute, into some kind of legal battle. It is the fool who ends up there. That's where the fool ends up. And this is a warning, obviously, for us. If we don't want to be foolish, we don't do that. Now, it doesn't mean that we never find ourselves in the middle of controversy. It doesn't mean we never find ourselves in the middle of contention, because Jesus said many things that found himself in the middle of controversy and contention. Always remember, when you're studying the Bible, you got to get a balance here. But we've got to balance out. We've got to be, in other words, we cannot be foolish when we speak, because a fool will simply speak and find themselves in contention, strife, dispute when they shouldn't. In other words, we have to be wise to know when to speak and when not to speak, when to engage, when not to engage, when to get involved in it, when not to. And it's something that we have to think about. And look, it does us no good to get involved in a contention and strife and fighting over some issue where really the whole biblical perspective is lost. We're really fighting among worldly ideologies and worldly philosophies. That doesn't help us. We if we're going to engage in it, we want to engage to try to offer the truth of God's word, right? But it's this contention, as it says, a fool's lips enter into contention, and his mouth calleth for strokes. That's an interesting just phrase. Let's do this. Let's pull up. Let me see here. I've got way too many things open on my iPad right now. Let's look at this. Let's go to Proverbs 18:6. Let's go to Proverbs 18:6. And let's pull up Bible Hub. BibleHub.com is very helpful because it brings up all the English translations. Proverbs 18:6 says this: "The lips of fools bring them strife." All right, now that's an interesting way of putting it. So the idea here would be, hey, it's the lip of the fool, right? Their lips bring them into strife. It's not like that it's not just the idea of, hey, sometimes you have to say things that may be controversial and may create some contention and create some difficulties. This is the idea that it's the lips of a fool. It just brings them strife because their words don't really accomplish anything. It just creates strife and contention. All right. We can understand it that way. And their mouths, I love this, and their mouths invite a beating. Their mouths invite a beating. So this is someone who is a fool. Remember, that's where it starts. It starts with foolishness inside us, right? And our foolishness, next thing lets us know, this is where our foolishness shows up in our speech. And this is where we need scripture and wisdom and restraint to stop the foolishness in us from manifesting itself in our words. And we've all done it. We've all found ourselves in a situation where we end up speaking up. Social media is the place for this to happen. You see a post, you see something, someone says something, next thing you know, you're like, tick, 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 send, post, and next thing you know, you're like, oh boy, that just brought strife upon me. And really, my mouth just invited a beating. That's what I just did. I didn't accomplish anything. I didn't bring glory to God. I didn't bring salt. I didn't bring light. I didn't bring wisdom. I didn't bring enlightenment. I didn't bring anything but a fight. way back, long time ago, years ago. I don't even know how many years it's been now. 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. I don't even know what it was. A long time ago. When I was on Facebook, there was a friend, I don't want to say a friend, an acquaintance of mine who was a pastor. And every day on his Facebook page, it would turn into World War III. I mean, it would just go crazy, the fighting and the arguing and the back and forth. And sadly, I found myself right there in the midst of those fights way too many times. I'm like, this is crazy. This is chaos. This is insane. In fact, I had a back and forth with Facebook. I'm like, okay, what do I do? Because anytime you tried to talk about something important, it just seemed like it turned into World War III and strife and contention. And then you would end up saying something that invited a beating. And then then I would just don't talk. I'm not going to talk about God. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to just forget all of that. I'll just talk about music, TV. But then it's like, well, then what? But even that sometimes would turn into fighting. So then you're trying to get rid of this person, get rid of this person, get rid of this person. Then they get offended. They're like, why did you get rid of me? Well, because everything you say makes me want to kill you. Okay, that not in a physical way. I'm just saying it gives you that feeling like, look, what are you doing? I can't handle you anymore. I got to get rid of you, right? In other words, it just creates these feelings that you should not have, sinful feelings. So then you're like, okay, I'll limit everyone. Well, then you realize, well, wait a minute. I'm basically creating a little small circle of people who kind of agree with me and I kind of agree with them, or we don't really say anything of significance because we don't want to create drama. And I was like, this is a mess. But yeah, that friend of mine who was a pastor, or again, acquaintance, every day it was World War III. And when you would finally get done with the thread, finally get done with all of the discussion, you just have to look at it and go, what did we accomplish there? Strife, contention, and our mouths in many cases invited a beating. Because it literally brought people to the point of feeling like, I want to kill you. I mean, literally, people would get so angry and so mad. And you've been there before. You've seen it. And you have to stop and go, what are you doing? What are you doing? And sometimes you're the cause of it. Sometimes you're not a cause of it, but you are a participant in it. And we've got to stop the foolishness that's in us, because we all have foolishness in us. We all do. Look. That's the part of maturing, right? That's the part of growing up. Now, we got to be very careful here, or we're going to go against some of the previous principles. But let me explain. One of the things about maturity is learning when to talk and when not to talk. When to speak, I probably shouldn't say that. I don't think that's really appropriate to say right now. I don't think that's really going to be beneficial. When you're young, you just sometimes you just blurt it out and you don't even think about it. Maturity. Now, the problem is, though, I'm going to get this very clear. From a Christian perspective, it's not about just not blurting it out. Now, yes, we want to stop that foolishness from leading us to contention and strife, but we got to remember this. We got to deal with the heart problem. It's the foolishness inside of us that must be dealt with. It's that depravity inside of us, and we feel that depravity. Again, I use the words, I feel like I want to kill you, and I use those words, strong language, but I used it for a reason, because that reflects what can happen inside of us. Even though we may never use the words, I want to kill you, we may never use those words, hatred and anger can build up in us. And next thing you know, it comes out. It's a heart issue. Here, it's foolishness that leads to contention and strife that leads to inviting a beating. That is where we don't want to get. We cannot do that. So, Proverbs 18:6, the lips of fools bring them strife, and their mouths invite a beating. New Living Translation, fools' words get them into constant quarrels. They are asking for a beating. ESV, a fool's lips walk into a fight, and his mouth invites a beating. Berean Study Bible, a fool's lips bring him strife, and his mouth invites a beating. King James Bible, a fool's lips enter into contention, and his mouth calleth for strokes. You get the idea. Those are the wrong kinds of words. Wrong kinds of words. And it's words that just bring about strife and fighting for no reason. And I think social media is the place where it's easier to do that. I don't think, look, when we're around people, I think sometimes we're a little bit more hesitant to get into that argument and get into that fight. But when we're just sitting there on our phone or behind a keyboard, it's like tick, 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 tick. And then I think sometimes when we see things that people post, I think in some cases we get far more upset than we may if someone said it at work. Like we may say it at work, and be like, oh man, that person, I can't believe they just said that. But you're like, I don't want to get into it. I don't want to have a fight here at work. I don't want to create a scene. So you just kind of walk away and deal with it. But man, when it's on social media, you're like, dun, 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 and you start typing. And in many cases, those words reflect. Listen, even though we don't use those words, the words may reflect, you know what? I wish I could kill you. Even though we don't use the word, the attitude shows up. The strife, the contention, the bitterness, the hatred, it shows up. Even if we Christianize it a little bit, we come across in an absolutely ungodly way. A New York Times reporter, I think it was a New York Times reporter today, posted something about what normal person buys zip ties, I think is how she put it. I can't remember. And I don't remember the whole context, but immediately looking at the comments, and some from professing Christians was, well, what do you expect? She works for the New York Times. The woman's an idiot. She's a moron. She's stupid. And you're like, first of all, that's only going to bring about more contention, and you're almost inviting yourself. Your mouth is basically inviting for a beating, for a fight. What light are you offering there? What salt are you offering there? Blessed is the peacemaker. Now, I'm not saying we never engage in a fight. I'm saying that we've got to really think about what we're saying, and is it proceeding from foolishness inside of us? All right, so there's the first verse that we considered, Proverbs 18:6. A fool's lips enter into contention, and his mouth calleth for strokes. Next, Proverbs 18:7. A fool's mouth is his destruction, and his lips are the snare of his soul. Proverbs 18:7. All right, so Proverbs 18:6, a fool's lips enter into contention, and his mouth calleth for strokes. Proverbs 18:7, a fool's mouth is his destruction, and his lips are the snare of his soul. Now, once again, please note how it begins. It's a fool. It's the internal foolishness that then shows up in speech. But please note what happens here. A fool's mouth is his destruction. His mouth, his words become his destruction. Let's look at how this is used in other translations. Other translation says this: the mouth of fools are their undoing. The mouths of fools are their ruin. A fool's mouth is his ruin. A fool's mouth is his ruin. The mouth of a fool is their undoing. When can you think of a time where your mouth, your speech was your undoing? Where you destroyed yourself in a sense. You hurt yourself. Now, again, I want you to think about this from a Christian perspective. It can be our undoing and what it does for the name of Christ, what it does for our testimony, what it does for the Christian witness. When was the last time your words were your undoing? You said it, now you're reaping the consequences of it. Nobody wants that. Nobody likes when we reap the negative consequences. But sometimes it's our mouth that puts us in a very bad situation. We don't want our words to be our, think about it. Here's something important. In what ways have your words led to spiritual defeat? And in what ways have your words led to your spiritual undoing? Now, not just the words you've spoken, but again, the words we say on social media or in email or in text. I think our words can do that. And in the heat of a moment, you can say something and boom, it's your undoing. It spiritually destroys you. It's something to think about. Now, sometimes, again, we are very good at Christianizing our words, right? Where our words, we may not say something like horrible, like, I want to kill you, but our words still show the attitude like of hatred, and you kind of want their destruction, even though you don't say it, right? Even though you don't say it, it happens. And whenever that comes out, then those words become our own stumbling, our own point of stumble, or it's the point at which we stumble, fall, and basically destroy ourselves. So I want you to think about your own spiritual life. There are a lot of things that you can look at your spiritual life, things that trip you up, things that make you fall, things that are just cause you so many problems in your spiritual life. How many times have you found that your words have put you in a very difficult situation spiritually, or have done damage to your spiritual life? Your words. Now, sometimes, sadly, I think a lot of Christians say a lot of crazy things on the internet, social media, Facebook, and they never bother to look back to go, whoa, what did I say there? What did I say there? What did I say there? Look, there were times I was on Facebook, I said things I should have never said, got into foolish fights, arguing, fighting, debating. I mean, that was early on in Facebook, early on, and I was still trying to figure out, how do I manage this? How do I work this? And next thing you know, you're just like, your adrenaline gets going. You're like, ooh, I got to get back and get into this fight because I got to prove a point. Because you convince yourself that you're trying to do it for good, right? I'm taking a stand for spiritual truth. I'm taking a stand for theological truth. But all you're really doing is hurting yourself spiritually. It's really bad when you're hurting yourself spiritually and you don't even realize you're hurting yourself spiritually till much later on. That's a very bad thing. And we've all been there. We've all done it. We've all been there. All right? So this is a very powerful verse. Let me read it to you again. A fool's mouth is his destruction. And then I love the second part. All right? A fool's mouth is his destruction, and his lips are the snare of his soul. His lips are the snare of his soul. Now that is a powerful words. Let's see how that shows up really quick here in other translations. So the mouth of fools are their undoing, and their lips are the snare to their very lives. The mouth of fools are their ruin. They trap themselves with their lips. A fool's mouth is his ruin, and his lips are a snare to his soul. A fool's mouth is his ruin, and his lips are a snare to his soul. Basically, most of them use the exact same phrase. How have you seen? So let's go through this. All right. Proverbs 18:6. So, and I'm just going to go back to verse 6 and ask again. So how have you found yourself that your words basically just enter you into contention and strife? All right. When have your words basically called for you to get a beating? They deserve a beating, is what they ultimately deserve. Next, not saying a beating should occur. Again, I got to be I'm trying to use some phrases to make a point, and someone's going to misinterpret what I'm saying. I'm not in any ways calling for any physical harm. Obviously not. If you ever listen to my teaching, I'm not calling for that. I'm saying that our attitudes come across that way. And so sometimes our words can come across in a way that almost calls for a beating. They deserve a beating. All right. Next. Again, I'm trying to be very careful to explain that. Next, Proverbs 18:7. A fool's mouth is his destruction. How have your words brought defeat and destruction to your spiritual life? And in what ways have you found yourself almost trapped in a snare because of your words? When have you found yourself trapped basically by your own words? All right. When was the last? How have your words become a snare? How have your words become a trap? How have you trapped yourself by your own words? Think of a situation. I'm getting all kinds of notifications right now because President Donald Trump has been impeached by the United States House. All right. me go through here. For incitement of insurrection at the Capitol, making him the first president to be impeached twice. So President Donald Trump has been impeached by the U.S. House, and a lot of that has to do with the words he said. And people are saying, hey, your words, you created this. Now, whether you agree or don't agree, you have to agree that his words got him in all kinds of trouble. His words got him in trouble. There are consequences to your words. But forget President Trump, even though my iPad's going to go crazy here for the next few minutes. Forget all of the notifications. We need to ask ourselves, how have our words got ourselves in trouble? How have our words caused destruction? How have our words put us into a trap? I've been there. I know you've been there. Now, what we can do is we can't fix what we've done, right? We can't go back. But we can say, this point forward, I'm going to be careful. And again, social media creates some major problems. And you really got to think about what you're doing there, all right? So there's Proverbs chapter 18, verse 7. Now let's go to Proverbs chapter, that was Proverbs chapter 18, verse 7. Let's go to Proverbs chapter 18, verse 8. The words of a talebearer are as wounds, and they go down into the innermost parts of the belly. The words of a talebearer are as wounds. Talebearer. Talebearer. Well, let's look up that word in the Blue Letter Bible app. All right. Let's go to Proverbs. Hang on. Let me close this. Proverbs 18. See what just happened? Okay, I'm going to close the Blue Letter Bible app. I don't know where it's at. It went to a completely different passage of Scripture. There we go, Proverbs chapter 8. Here we go. Proverbs chapter 18, verse 8. The words of a talebearer. Let's look at this. Talebearer. It's this Hebrew word.
Strong's H, 5372. Nirgan. Nirgan.
Nirgan. Nirgan. Now, this is used 4 times. It's translated 3 times talebearer. 1 time it's used for whisper. The Strong's definition is basically to roll to pieces a slanderer, talebearer, whisperer. Its outline for biblical usage is to murmur, to whisper, murmurers, backbite, slander, talebearer, backbiter. All right. Now we're getting to something very specific. All right, we're getting to some very important principles here. So let's go through these again. First of all, a fool's lips enter into a contention. How have your words put you in strife time and time again until you ultimately say something that deserves a beating? All right, because his mouth calleth for strokes. Proverbs 18:7, a fool's mouth is his destruction, and his lips are the snare of his soul. How have your mouth, your words, your speech led to pain and destruction? How have your words placed you and put you in a trap? You really need to think about how it happened and what you said and where you said it and what you did. All right. And then verse 8, Proverbs 18:8, the words of a talebearer are as wounds. The words of a talebearer is a murmurer, a whisperer, a backbite, a slanderer, a backbiter. A talebearer is the one who runs around talking about other people, runs around telling everyone about this and telling everyone about this and telling everyone, oh, did you hear about this? And did you hear about that? And did you hear about this? When it's nobody else's business, they have no right to do it, and they just want to tell their tale. They have a tell, they're holding on to a tell, and they've got to let someone know. It's like a kid where money's burning a hole in their pocket and they've got to spend it. Well, guess what? They got a tell to tell, and it's burning a hole in their mouth until they can speak it, until they can share it. I'm trying to turn off all of my notifications because it's going crazy right now. Okay, more words are coming. But a talebearer. Now, let's look at that verse. Let's go back to to Bible Hub. Let's go to Bible Hub. And let's go to Proverbs 18:8, and let's see how it shows up in other translations. I love this. The words of a gossip. The words of a gossip. All right? The words of a whisperer. The words of a gossip, the words of a talebearer. Now, the King James has the words of a talebearer are as wounds, are as wounds. A lot of the other translations for their manuscripts obviously did not have that concept there because they ignore that idea completely. They don't even deal with it. In fact, let me look at something. I'm going to look up the word wounds here in the King James or in the interlinear. The words of a talebearer are as wounds. Okay, I'm going to look at the interlinear for the King James here. And the word wounds here, interesting. It's this word.
Strong's H3859. Lahaim. Lahaim.
Lahaim. And it's interesting. It means to burn in, wound, all right? But the outline of biblical usage is really weird. To gulp, to swallow greedily, to be gulped. That's interesting, right? Because Proverbs 18:8 seems to carry the idea the words of a talebearer are as wounds. I kind of see it as the way that comes across to me in the King James is the idea that, hey, the talebearer tells those tales and tells those stories and speaks those words, and they're as wounds. They're inflicting pain and wounds, and they're hurting people. They're hurting people. Now, if we go to other translations, they approach it a little different. Let me give you an example. Proverbs 18:8. The words of a gossip are like choice morsels. They go down to the innermost part or inmost parts. Rumors are dainty morsels that sink deep into one's heart. The words of a whisperer are like delicious morsels. They go down into the inner parts of the body. All right. So the idea, the words wounds there is the words of a talebearer they're something that we gulp down. We gulp them down and they go to the innermost parts of the belly. It's interesting that the outline for biblical usage for the word seems to be more in line with that idea. And again, you can look it up in the interlinear. So it's almost the idea here that the words of a talebearer, like here we go, the words of a talebearer are as something that is gulped down and they go down into the innermost parts of the belly. Now, I'm not going to say they don't inflict wounds because trust me, they do. But I think that there's something almost tasty. It's almost like a good snack. Oh, look at those words of gossip and whispering. Ooh, I want to hear about this. And we eat them down like it's our favorite snack. It's like we love it. We can't get enough of it. It's like me and oatmeal cookies. Like, oh, that's good. And here and listen, we're all. I think this is what makes talebearing so tempting, is because you can always find a willing audience. They'll hang on your every word. Oh, and as soon as we get it, like it's like someone handing you a cookie and you're like, oh, these cookies are good. Oh, I got to go share this with some other people. Now, technically, when it comes to cookies, I'm not sharing with anybody. I'm going to eat them. But when we taste how great the secret is, the gossip, the slander, the backbiting, we take it and we want to share it with everyone else because we want to have that audience. And it's amazing how quick it can spread. So what can we learn here? What can we learn here? Let's break this down a couple of ways. I wanted to go. There's a lot of other things I wanted to do here, and we may come back to this. But I wanted to at least look at these three verses, all right? And I'm going to give you something to look up here, but let's go through these. Let's look at some principles here, right? So let's go to Proverbs chapter 18, verse 6, all right? The first thing that we need to be concerned with is that first of all, let's state this. The first thing we have to be concerned about is the foolishness that is inside of us, right? Our sinful nature, in a sense, makes us foolish. A sinful nature is not governed by biblical wisdom. Sinful nature rejects the things of God. Our minds are at enmity with God. Our nature doesn't think from a spiritual perspective. That's why our ways are not God's ways. Our thoughts are not his thoughts. So we have a foolishness inside of us. We've got to realize that. So the first thing we always have to realize, we constantly are battling the fool inside of us. We're constantly dealing with the fool that is inside of us. But what we have to be careful of is the fool inside of us, allowing that fool to get those words outside of us. We've got to try to stop that. Now, we got to fix the fool inside of us, but we still want to stop those words. And the first thing we need to ask ourselves, do our words simply lead to strife and contention? There is a time that you have to confront. There is a time that you've got to speak up. But you don't want to be the one just simply running around and that everything you say just brings strife upon you. And in fact, you can tell you're just saying things to create a fight. You're not saying words to try to help. You're not saying words. You got to always ask the motive. Why are you saying what are you saying? Why are you saying that on social media? Are you saying it simply to generate controversy? Are you saying it just to fight? If you are, then your words are just only going to lead to strife. And then they ultimately can lead to you inviting a beating. That in a sense, you deserve a beating because of what you've been saying. We don't want our words just to be for strife's sake. We don't want that, right? Second, so there is words of strife, words of contention. We don't want those. Now, sometimes we have to use words that will bring about strife and contention, but we're not doing so just for the sake of it. It's a hard balance to find there, all right? That's Proverbs 18:6, Proverbs 18:7. A fool's mouth is his destruction, and his lips are the snare of his soul. So and this is where I want to ask you, and it's something you've got to ask yourself. In what ways have your words hurt you spiritually? And in what ways have you found yourself that your words became a trap to you? Now, you got to think about what were those words? What did you say and how did it cause destruction? What did you say and how did it lay a trap for you? That's something only you can figure out. And right before you speak, you need to stop and go, okay, are these words going to actually hurt me and cause destruction? Are these words laying a trap for myself? You've got to think about that. You've got to think about, are you about to put yourself in a trap? Right? I think we've seen a lot of this play out this week. And then the words of a talebearer are as wounds, or they are of something that we just gulp down, and they go down into the innermost parts of the belly. Proverbs 18:8. Proverbs 18:8. So Proverbs 18:6, 18:7, and 18:8. So I want to ask you, are you a talebearer? Are you a talebearer? How much of your words, how many of your words, how much of your conversation is about people? I used to hate this so much at work. My years in the workforce sometimes were great because a lot of times I was able to engage in awesome conversations and talk about all kinds of cool things. But so many times I'd be around people and just like, here we go. We're going to talk about, we're on the second floor of the hospital. Oh, we got to talk about so-and-so who works down in the pharmacy. We got to talk about someone who works in the laboratory and, oh man, they're idiots and blah, 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 and talk about people, and talk about people, and talk about people, and talk about people. And I'm like, can we ever have a conversation about something more important than people? Stop talking about people. Stop. And sadly in the church, there's a lot of, let's talk about people. Let's talk about people. Let's not talk about ideas and concepts and philosophies. Our conversation sometimes, our level of conversation sometimes is embarrassingly low, and we should be ashamed of it. But are you a talebearer? Do you backbite and gossip and slander? Look, there's a time it's not for you to talk. We're not to do that. We're not to be gossipers and backbiters and slanderers. And trust me, I hate when it happens. Look, there's a time to speak about a subject, and there's a time just to say, you know what? Stop. I don't know all the details. I don't know anything about that. I'm not going to speak about it. I'm going to be very careful what I say. Because here's the thing. Talebearers, this is very important. Talebearers, gossips, backbiters, they speak not in order to help. They typically speak simply to spread, they can give the information because everyone's eating it down. Everyone just, give me more. And it gives us some sense of, I don't know what. In some cases, it's just pure evil motives. We want to destroy the person we're talking about, which is pure evil because a Christian should want to build someone up and restore and help, not destroy. Like sometimes the pastor from Hillsong who had to resign because of all the things that he had done. All right. Now, sometimes you've got to talk about a story like that and say, this is what happened. They're all the current situations with all the information's coming out about Ravi Zachariah and his ministry and all the investigations that are going on and all the things that they have found. Horrible information. Now, when you get ready to talk about it, why are you talking about it? Like, that's a question you have to ask yourself. What do you hope to talk about? What do you hope to do? The person fell into sin. The person, I'll never forget, because a lot of people got mad at me when he was the pastor of I don't remember the name, First Baptist Church, Hammond, Indiana. It's connected with Hyles Anderson. Jack Hyles was the pastor there. I don't remember. I think it's First Baptist Church of Hammond, Indiana, I believe. Hopefully I'm not getting the name correct. I'm not going to state the name of the pastor that this happened to, because since I don't have all the details in front of me, I don't want to give any wrong information. And I don't want to bring his name up again because that would defeat what I'm getting ready to say. But I remember when the pastor, I don't even remember what year it was, he got involved. I don't know what he was involved in. I don't even remember all the details. It was something scandalous. It was something bad. And he ultimately went to jail. And it was horrible. It was horrible. And I remember immediately it was like, ooh, did you hear about so-and-so? Did you hear about what he did? 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 And I remember turning on the microphone and saying, hey, what he did was horrible. What he did needs to be condemned. And we need to look at ourselves and look to where we could be and what we could be doing. But then I asked the question, is anyone reaching out to the person to try to help pray for them, restore them, be there for them? And it's like, no, everybody wanted to talk about them. Nobody really cared about trying to help out. Now, what the person did was horrible. What the person did was wrong. Again, I've told the story of the person who I knew who worked at some churches here in the local area. We were not super close friends. Someone he was super close friends with worked for me in the hospital. And so she would tell him about the theological discussions we would have. And we had some interaction on social media back then. We had some interaction. Well, next thing you know, this individual ends up in all kinds of trouble for some possibly, it appears, I don't know if it was proven, basically inappropriate relationships with young people. A horrible, horrible thing. I don't even know. I don't know if he was at a church at the time it happened. I don't even remember all the details. But I'll never forget that the story broke. A lot of people talked about it, and I'll never forget. And sadly, to this day, I haven't been able to find the person. I think he went to jail in like August. I never got the letter. The letter never showed up. But all of a sudden, last year, the year before, 2019, on Thanksgiving, like the day before Thanksgiving, and I think it was the day before Thanksgiving, the letter showed up, and on Thanksgiving Day, I came across it, and it was like, no, it was the day before Thanksgiving. That evening, I came across the letter. I'm like, when did we get this? And someone said, I don't know, just the other day or today, I don't remember. And I looked at it, I'm like, this is from him. And so I opened the letter and I read, and I was like, oh my goodness, what is going on? And he basically said, everyone abandoned me. No one will talk to me. No Christians will talk to me. Please help me. And I was like, how did we miss this letter? I immediately, the next morning, got up. It was Thanksgiving Day, went to the jail and was like, I need to find this person. I couldn't get in touch with anybody on Thanksgiving Day. Then day after I called the jail, or maybe even that night, I was finally able to get in touch with someone. And they're like, that person's already been discharged. And I was like, I'm like, wait, what? Or released. I'm thinking medical terms. He'd already been released. But the point is, all Christians turned on him. Now, what he did was horrible. And I'm not saying anything should be justified. But we spend so much time talking about people, we do very little sometimes talking to them to help them. There's got to be restoration. Right? I mean, it had been easy to sit around and go, did you hear what Peter did? He denied Jesus not just once. Are you ready for this? Not just twice. He did it 3 times. Just like Jesus said, what a pathetic loser. I always knew he was a loser. I always knew he was pathetic. I always knew that when he talked, he was full of garbage and that you can't believe him. I always knew, I got to hop on. Good thing the disciples didn't have social media back then, because they would have been like, Hey, this just in, Peter denied Jesus 3 times. We all knew he was a failure. We all knew he was pathetic. It wasn't time to sit around and talk about Peter. It was time to be there for Peter to help him. And when Jesus showed up, he didn't show up to talk about Peter. He talked directly to Peter, and then he went through the process of restoring him. Peter, do you love me? Yes, feed my sheep. Peter, do you love me? And then went through the 3 times you denied, 3 times restoration. I'm just saying that as a talebearer, we've got to look at our hearts and ask why we do that. Why do we want to talk about people? Sometimes we need to be talking to them, or even if we can't talk to them, pray for them. Look at the pastor of Hillsong. Look, I have no love for the theology of Hillsong. None. I have no love for their music, no love for their theology, no love for the way they do church. I'm completely 1,000% against them in every way, shape, or form. But the pastor failed. So what do I do now? Oh, now let's kick them when they're down. Let's kick them. Come on. I knew your theology was garbage, and I knew you were pathetic. And whoa, slow down. There's people who have good theology who fall into sin. I think David had a pretty good understanding of who God was, and he still fell into sin. It's not the time to now have a theological argument about their doctrine and theology. It's like, man, is someone there trying to help this person? Is there someone there with this person? It's not a time to talk about them. It's a time to pray for them. And talebearing and backbiting and gossip and slander, that shouldn't be a part of Christians. But it is. It is. And because, and not just, listen, not just the speaking of the talebearing, not just speaking of the backbiting, but us gulping it down and because we find it so tasty and we eat it up. There's a time like, no. Why are you telling me about that? Why are you telling me about that person? Why? What do you hope to accomplish by telling me? What's the goal here? What are we hoping to accomplish here? Now, yes, sometimes when we're dealing with an international story, big, then yeah, Christians, sometimes we'll talk about, hey, I heard this, simply to find out what's going on, right? But then we pray about it. And in some situations, you have to talk about it. There's situations going on right now, I won't name the church, that some things don't make any sense right now. What's going on there? I don't know what's going on. And people have sent me information, and that's perfectly okay, right? They haven't offered any slanderous, they're like, here's what's being reported, here's the link. We don't know what's going on right now. It's being reported. So I've said I'm not going to talk about it right now until we know for sure what's going on. But then when I talk about it, I've got to ask myself the question, why am I talking about it? So I've got to try to put these same principles into practice in front of the microphone. Why am I talking about it? Why am I going to mention it? Why am I going to say that? What do I hope to accomplish? Who am I trying to help? And I think just talebearing is something that we really need to think long and hard about. So here's what I want you to do. Actually, I'm going to change what I was going to give you to do. I want you just to look up everything you can find in the Bible about gossip, slander, backbiting, and being a talebearer. I want you to find all the scriptures you can find. Just create a list. Backbiting, gossip, slander, talebearer. In fact, I think, let me look here. I'm going to grab a Bible dictionary because I think this is just something we really don't think a lot about. I mean, of all the major sins, talebearer is not like, ooh, where nobody gets church discipline for being a talebearer, okay? Or if they do, it's got to be very, 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 very rare, okay? It's probably happened, but it's not the thing that most people get in trouble for, right? Let's see here. Let me see if talebearer is even in the Bible dictionary that I'm looking at. I don't believe it is in this Bible dictionary. So let's look up gossip. See if gossip is, gossip. If you have a Bible dictionary, look up, let me see here. How big is the term? Let me go here. How big is the entry, I should say. Gossip, where is it? Okay, it's not super big. It's a small one. Gossip, a person who spreads rumors or idle, fruitless tales. The Apostle Paul describes some of the early believers as not only idle, but gossips, tattlers, busybodies. All right. So just look up gossip, slander, talebearer, backbiting. Just look up all of those terms and just try to not only create a list of verses, just try to write a summary after you read all of them, just a summary of what God's word has to say in regards to being a talebearer. Yes, it's tasty. And that's what we all have to be careful of. It's so easy to get caught up in it. And we just can't do that. We just cannot do that. And again, it's balance. What you have to understand is when you're dealing with Proverbs, there's always this balance. Like, hey, it doesn't mean we never find ourselves in the middle of contention and strife, because sometimes we have to, but it means not being a fool about finding ourselves in strife and contention so that our mouth deserves a beating, right? We sometimes have to use very strong language, but we don't want to use language and use words that ultimately destroy us or hurt us spiritually or lays a trap for us. And we have to remember that being a talebearer, those words are tasty and they go down inside of people. We gulp them down. We've got to be careful that we're always going to be able to find an audience for gossip. We're always going to be able to find an audience for gossip. And we are many times are a willing participant in being a part of that audience. And sometimes we're the ones speaking those words because we know that so many people love to hear them. But there are times you have to speak up and say, hey guys, this is what happened. Hey, this is what happened. This is what happened. This is what occurred. I just think that you've got to know when to say it and when not to. What's your goal in talking about it? If it's just to hurt and destroy and to kick and beat down, that's not good. Now, there are times where you say, look, this has been reported everywhere, so I'm not telling some secret. Now, what we need to do is look at what happened and see what we can learn ourselves. We don't know so much make it about the situation we're talking about. We use it as a situation to see what we can learn about ourselves. All right? So, I don't know. It's a fine line there, but these are very important principles. Proverbs 18, 6, 7, and 8. I know we just kind of walk through that, not in a teaching way, but more like, hey, let's just struggle with this. But that's the goal of the Bible study exercises. I want you to just look up talebearer, gossip, slanderer, backbiting. Find every verse in the Bible you can about that subject. Just to remind yourself. I know you're going to say, well, I know the Bible says it's bad, but you may find some verses that maybe really speak to you, that may be convicting. And we need this. I mean, we just had the president of the United States of America just impeached for the second time. Doesn't look like he'll be removed from office, but impeached the second time. I don't know how the fallout from this, but it all ultimately centered, the second impeachment, centered primarily on what words he said and how we interpret those words and were those words right or wrong. Well, whatever you think about the words, you cannot deny. They ultimately laid his words were a trap for him. His words ultimately hurt him. His words ultimately hurt a lot of people. No matter what your feelings are about the words, you can't see the words as being wise. You can't see that the words were smart. You can't say that the words were great to continue using words, making claims that you weren't backing up with facts. Well, we need to stop and look at ourselves and what we say and what we have said. All right, there you go. You can contact me at newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. Everyone have a great day. God bless.